You gave everything, your time, your energy, your patience, and somehow you ended up feeling more alone than before. You've done this more than once. Different person, same story, and somewhere deep down, you've asked yourself a question you're almost afraid to answer. Why does this keep happening to me? Don't answer that yet, because the real answer isn't what you think. If you identify as an empath, someone who feels deeply, gives generously, and absorbs other people's emotions like water into soil, you've probably noticed a painful pattern. The people who come closest to you often take the most. They don't ask, they drain, and you let them, not because you're weak, not because you're naive, but because something in your psychology is doing something very specific. Something Carl Jung spent his entire career trying to explain. Here's what that pattern looks like in real life. You meet someone, they feel intense, magnetic, like they see you in a way others don't. They reflect your values back to you. They say the right words. They feel like a mirror, and you feel chosen. But slowly, something shifts. Their needs become the center of everything. Your feelings become inconvenient. Your boundaries become problems. And your empathy, the very thing you thought made you special, becomes the thing they use. This isn't a coincidence. This is a psychological pattern with a name. Before we go deeper, understand this clearly. You are not broken. You are not too sensitive. You are not the problem. What you are is someone whose nervous system learned a very specific survival skill early in life. A skill that made perfect sense then, but keeps misfiring now. Empathy, deep, radical empathy in most people doesn't come from nowhere. It develops as an adaptation, a response to an environment where reading emotions meant safety. Maybe you grew up in a home where you had to sense someone else's mood before they spoke, to know if today was safe or not. That training didn't disappear when you grew up. It became your personality. Carl Jung introduced a concept called the shadow, the unconscious part of yourself that contains everything you've denied, suppressed, or never allowed yourself to be. For most empaths, the shadow holds traits like assertiveness, anger, selfishness, dominance, entitlement, not because those traits are evil, but because somewhere along the way you learned those traits weren't safe to have. So you buried them. And here is where Jung's insight becomes almost uncomfortable. What we suppress in ourselves, we attract in others. The narcissist, with their complete comfort in selfishness, their lack of guilt around taking, their unapologetic dominance, is not your opposite. They are your shadow walking toward you in human form. Psychologists call this projective identification, a process where we unconsciously recognize in others the qualities we've rejected in ourselves. And our nervous system responds not with fear, but with fascination. Feels like chemistry, feels like depth, feels like finally being understood. But what it actually is your unconscious self trying to reclaim what it lost. There's a second mechanism at work here. Attachment research calls it trauma bonding. When intermittent reinforcement cycles of warmth and withdrawal activates the brain's dopamine reward system more powerfully than consistent love ever could. The uncertainty keeps you hooked, not because you enjoy pain, but because your brain has been trained to work harder for love that feels uncertain. Familiar, unpredictable love feels like real love. Calm, consistent love feels boring. This is not weakness. This is neuroscience. So what do you actually do with this? Not set better boundaries. Not love yourself more. Those aren't answers. They're instructions without a map. Here is the map. Step 1. Meet your shadow. Sit with this question seriously. What qualities in the narcissist secretly fascinate you, not just repel you? Their confidence, their unapologetic nature, their ability to prioritize themselves without guilt. Write it down. That discomfort you feel reading those words, that's where your shadow lives. Why this works? Jung's individuation process, becoming a whole self, requires integrating the shadow, not eliminating it. When you consciously acknowledge these traits, they lose their magnetic pull in others. Real-life example: the empath who always admired people who don't care what others think. When they began practicing small acts of self-priority, they stopped being drawn to people who weaponize that quality. Step 2. Interrupt the familiarity script. Your nervous system mistakes familiarity for rightness. If emotional intensity, inconsistency, and feeling needed feel like love, you will keep choosing that unconsciously. The practice: when someone feels electrically interesting in the first meeting, slow down, not because intensity is always wrong, but because your specific nervous system uses intensity as a false positive. Why this works? Cognitive behavioral psychology shows that awareness of cognitive distortions, in this case, equating intensity with compatibility, weakens their automatic influence. Real-life example: the person who noticed they always felt finally seen in the first hour with someone and learned that feeling was actually a red flag, not a green one. Step 3. Rebuild your anger. This one is uncomfortable. Most empaths have a severed relationship with their own anger, not because they don't feel it, but because they were trained early that their anger was dangerous, selfish, or unacceptable. Anger, in healthy form, is a boundary signal. Tells you, this is not okay. When you can't access that signal, you override it with understanding, with excuses, with empathy for the person hurting you. Why this works? Neuroscientist Antonio Damasio's research shows that emotions, including anger, are not distractions from good decisions. They are the data. Reclaiming anger reconnects you to your own boundary system. Real-life example: the empath who kept saying, "I understand why they acted that way," until they learned that understanding someone and accepting mistreatment are two completely different things. Step 4. Practice receiving, not just giving. Empaths are often deeply uncomfortable being cared for. Receiving feels unsafe, vulnerable, like owing something, so they stay in the giving position, which is exactly the position a narcissistic dynamic requires. The practice is small. Let someone help you this week. Don't deflect the compliment. Don't minimize the gesture. Sit in it. Why this works? Attachment theory shows that earned secure attachment is built through reciprocal vulnerability, not one-sided giving. Practicing receiving rebuilds the neural expectation that care goes both ways. Step 5. Choose boring love once. Just once. Choose the person who is consistent, who doesn't keep you guessing, who shows up the same way every time. And sit with the discomfort of how unfamiliar that feels. Don't mistake calm for cold. Don't mistake reliability for lack of depth. Your nervous system will call it boring. That's the signal you're breaking the pattern. Here is the one mental model to hold on to. You don't attract narcissists because you're too much. You attract them because you've made yourself too small. The shadow you buried, the anger you silenced, the needs you never named, all of that created a vacancy. And certain people are very skilled at filling vacancies. The work is not to become harder, colder, or more guarded. The work is to become whole. Jung once wrote that until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. You haven't been unlucky in love. You've been running an unconscious pattern that no one ever named for you. Now it has a name, and named things can be changed. You don't need to become someone who feels less. You need to become someone who feels themselves just as clearly as they feel everyone else. That's not a small thing. That's everything.